The unseen patron Fiona Winters stared at the notification blinking on her tablet screen. Another sale. The third this month from the same anonymous buyer. Username Night Horizon 7 had purchased her most ambitious piece yet. An impressionistic cityscape at dusk, buildings bleeding into a watercolor sky. She'd priced it higher than usual, certain it would languish in her online store for months. Yet here was the confirmation, payment already processed. Someone actually bought Urban Twilight, she murmured to herself, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. Her cramped studio apartment in Portland doubled as her workspace, canvases stacked against walls, the smell of oils and turpentine permeating everything she owned. She clicked through to the shipping details. Like the previous purchases, it would go to a P.O. box in Seattle with no personal name attached. Just the username and a business address for insurance purposes. Blackwood Investments. Fiona carefully wrapped the canvas, wondering about the person who'd connected so deeply with her work. 3 paintings in 1 month wasn't coincidence. This was someone who saw something in her art that resonated. In a world where her gallery submissions were met with polite rejections, this mysterious patron felt like a lifeline. Across the city, in a sleek high-rise apartment, Julian Blackwood uncorked a bottle of Pinot Noir and settled onto his leather sofa. The evening stretched before him, empty like so many others had been since Victoria walked out 6 months ago. The breakup had been his fault. Too many late nights at the office, too many canceled plans. By the time he realized what he was losing, Victoria had already packed her things, leaving only silence and regret. Julian opened his laptop, checking the confirmation email. The painting would arrive next week. He'd discovered Fiona's work while mindlessly scrolling through an online art marketplace during a particularly sleepless night. Something about her style, the way she captured light at transitional moments, spoke to him. The first purchase had been impulsive, but after hanging it in his office, he found himself returning to her store, purchasing more. He never used his real name. After the messy end with Victoria, anonymity felt safer, a barrier between himself and potential hurt. Art was something he could appreciate from a distance. Mr. Blackwood? His assistant's voice came through the intercom. The investors from Tokyo are online too. Julian sighed, closing the art website. Put them through. Back to the world of numbers and negotiations, where everything made logical sense. Meanwhile, Fiona packaged her painting with careful hands, including a handwritten note as she did with all her sales. Thank you for seeing what I see. Fiona W. Little did she know that her simple note would travel to the desk of a man whose life was invisibly connected to hers, a man who had once loved her estranged sister Victoria, and whose wealth would one day hold the power to fulfill or destroy her artistic dreams. For now, she was simply grateful for the rent money, unaware that each brushstroke was painting her toward an inevitable collision of past and future. Brushstrokes of Memory 5. Years passed like the changing of seasons in Fiona's paintings, gradual shifts of light and shadow until the canvas appeared completely transformed. Her work had evolved from online obscurity to feature in small galleries across the Pacific Northwest. Critics praised her emotional landscapes, the way she captured transitional moments between states of being. What began as a struggle to pay rent had blossomed into a career with promise. The cafe where Fiona sat overlooking Elliott Bay buzzed with morning energy. Seattle's skyline reflected in her coffee as she reviewed her portfolio on her tablet. Today's meeting could change everything. Damian Reed of Reed Ventures had expressed interest in financing her dream. A permanent gallery showcasing emerging artists, with her work as the anchor collection. Ms. Winters? A deep voice interrupted her thoughts. Fiona looked up to see a tall man in a charcoal suit, his dark hair peppered with silver at the temples. Something about his eyes, intense, analytical, made her pause. Mr. Reed, please call me Fiona. She extended her hand. Damian, then. His handshake was firm but brief. I've been following your work for some time. As they settled into conversation, Fiona couldn't shake the feeling of familiarity. Had they met at an exhibition? She'd attended dozens in recent years, shaking countless hands. Damian studied her portfolio with genuine interest. Your evolution as an artist is remarkable. These earlier works, he paused at an image of urban twilight. This one speaks to me. The loneliness within a crowded space. That was a turning point piece for me, Fiona said, surprised. Sold to an online collector years ago. What she couldn't see was the momentary tension in Damien's jaw. 5 years earlier, when he still used his family name Blackwood for his investment firm before rebranding under his middle name Reed after his father's passing, he had purchased that very painting. It now hung in his home office, a daily companion. Your proposal for the gallery is ambitious, Damien said, steering back to business. Why Seattle? You're based in Portland, correct? I moved to Seattle 3 years ago. Needed a fresh perspective. Fiona didn't mention fleeing the shadow of her sister Victoria's success as a prominent surgeon, the family comparisons that had always made her feel smaller. Seattle's art community feels like home now. Damien nodded, making notes. What he didn't say. Seattle was where he'd rebuilt himself after Victoria Winters had ended their relationship, citing his emotional unavailability. He'd never connected the surnames. Winters wasn't uncommon, and Victoria rarely spoke of her artistic younger sister. As they discussed financial projections, Damien found himself drawn to Fiona's passion. Unlike her polished, calculating sister, Fiona spoke with unguarded enthusiasm about creating space for artists like herself, those who captured the world's overlooked moments. I'll need to review these numbers with my team, he said finally. But preliminarily, I'm interested in moving forward. Fiona's face lit up. That would be incredible. Walking back to his office later, Damien paused before a small gallery window displaying one of Fiona's newer works, a forest path splitting in 2 directions, light filtering differently down each route. He'd purchased her work for years under his anonymous account, never realizing the artist was connected to his past. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd found solace in paintings created by the sister of the woman who'd broken his heart. Now he held the financial key to Fiona's dream, a position of power he hadn't sought. His phone buzzed with a text from his assistant. Found background info on F. Winters as requested. Attached was a family photo from a local charity event years ago, Fiona standing slightly apart from her sister Victoria. Damien stared at the image, the pieces finally clicking into place. Memory and present collided like colors mixing on a palette, creating something neither planned nor anticipated. The Gallery of Secrets, the converted warehouse space in Seattle's Pioneer Square district, echoed with the sounds of transformation. Workers installed track lighting while Fiona directed the placement of partition walls, her vision taking physical form with each passing day. Morning light streamed through the tall industrial windows, casting long rectangles across the concrete floor. The main exhibition space needs to be more open, Fiona explained, sketching adjustments on her tablet. We want the artwork to breathe. Damien stood nearby, observing her in her element. In the 6 weeks since their initial meeting, they'd fallen into an effective partnership. His business acumen complemented her artistic vision, and the gallery, now named Threshold, was progressing ahead of schedule. What remained unspoken hung between them like invisible brushstrokes on canvas. Damien had not revealed his identity as Night Horizon, nor his past connection to Victoria. Each time Fiona mentioned her family, always vaguely, always briefly, he noticed how her expression tightened, how she quickly redirected the conversation. The contractor needs approval on the lighting budget, Damien said, handing her a spreadsheet. Their fingers brushed, a moment of contact that lingered. You've been unusually generous with this project, Fiona noted, studying the figures. Most investors would have slashed these requests. Damien shrugged. Light transforms art. I've learned that from your work. Fiona glanced up, surprised. You speak like someone who lives with art, not just someone who funds it. I've collected pieces that matter to me over the years, he admitted. A half-truth. Later that afternoon, as they reviewed artist submissions for the opening exhibition, Fiona's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and frowned before silencing it. Everything all right? Damien asked. Just my sister. We're not... She hesitated. Particularly close. Family can be complicated, he offered neutrally. Victoria has always been the family success story. Brilliant doctor. Perfect life. Fiona's voice carried an edge Damien hadn't heard before. Art was never considered a viable path in our household. Victoria reminded me of that frequently. The name landed like a stone between them. Damien kept his expression carefully neutral. Sometimes people project their own insecurities onto others. You sound like you speak from experience, Fiona observed. I was engaged once, he said carefully. It ended because I couldn't measure up to certain expectations. Her loss, Fiona said simply. The gallery space fell quiet as the construction crew departed for the day. They worked in companionable silence until sunset painted the walls amber. Damien watched Fiona lost in concentration, wondering how two sisters could be so different. Victoria's calculated precision versus Fiona's intuitive understanding of emotional landscapes. The gallery's soft opening was scheduled for the following week, a private event for potential donors and artists. As they finalized details, Fiona paused at the empty wall designated for her own work. Which pieces are you planning to display? Damien asked. I'm including Divergent Paths and Morning Tide, she replied, then hesitated. There's another piece I've been trying to locate, Urban Twilight. It was special to me, created during a particularly difficult time. I've contacted the buyer through the online platform, hoping they might loan it for the exhibition. Damien felt his pulse quicken. And if they don't respond? Then I'll display something else, she said, though disappointment colored her voice. It's just, some artworks feel like markers of who you were becoming. That one represents when I first believed in myself. That evening, Damien stood in his home office, staring at Urban Twilight. The painting that had first drawn him to Fiona's work, the painting created by Victoria's sister, purchased during his darkest days after their breakup. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. His phone chimed with an email notification from the art marketplace, a message from Fiona Winters to Night Horizon 7, requesting the loan of her painting for a special exhibition. Damien's finger hovered over the response button. The gallery's future, Fiona's dream, balanced precariously on secrets neither had fully revealed. Victoria's shadow stretched across their connection, unseen but ever present, like the negative space in a composition that defines everything around it. Colors of truth. The evening of Threshold's soft opening arrived with a nervous energy that vibrated through the transformed warehouse. Gallery lights cast perfect pools of illumination on carefully hung artworks, while caterers arranged delicate hors d'oeuvres on minimalist trays. Fiona, dressed in a deep emerald wrap dress that complemented her auburn hair, greeted early arrivals with practiced charm that belied her inner tension. You've created something remarkable here, Damien said, appearing at her elbow with two champagne flutes. Unlike his usual business attire, tonight he wore a charcoal turtleneck under his blazer, a concession to the artistic environment. We did, Fiona corrected him, accepting the champagne. This wouldn't exist without your belief in the vision. She hesitated. And speaking of belief, I received the most unexpected response this morning. Damien's expression remained neutral. Oh? That painting I mentioned, Urban Twilight. The collector agreed to loan it for the exhibition. It was delivered this afternoon. She gestured toward the far wall where the cityscape hung in a prominent position, a spotlight highlighting its moody blues and violets. After 5 years, seeing it again feels like reuniting with an old friend. Damien studied the painting rather than meet her eyes. It's even more powerful in person. The note that came with it was curious, Fiona continued. It said, some art finds its way home eventually. No signature. Just the username I've known for years. Before Damien could respond, the gallery door opened, admitting a stream of well-dressed patrons. The moment of potential revelation slipped away as they separated to fulfill their hosting duties. Throughout the evening, Damien watched Fiona in her element. Passionate, articulate, luminous. Nothing like Victoria's cool calculation. How had he never asked Victoria about her family during their 2 years together? The few times he'd mentioned siblings, Victoria had dismissed the topic, calling her relationship with her sister complicated. Now he understood why. As the crowd thinned near closing, Fiona found herself standing beside Damien before Urban Twilight, while both silently contemplating the painting that connected them in ways she didn't yet understand. You know, I've always wondered about the person who bought this, she said. They purchased 2 other paintings afterward, always anonymously, always when I most needed the income. Perhaps they saw something of themselves in your work, Damien suggested. I included a note with each painting, she continued, always thanking them for seeing what I see. And if you met this collector now, Damien asked carefully. What would you say? Fiona considered this. I'd thank them for believing in me when no one else did. Even my own sister. She trailed off, then straightened. Victoria always said art was a hobby, not a career. When she started dating this investment banker, she tried to get him to offer me a job as his assistant. Can you imagine? She laughed softly. I refused, we argued, and that was the beginning of the end for us. We haven't spoken properly in years. Damien's breath caught. This banker, what was his name? Julian something. Blackwood, I think. It didn't last between them anyway. She turned to him, puzzled by his expression. Damien? The moment stretched between them, taut with unspoken revelations. I have a confession, he said finally. My name wasn't always Damien Reed. After my father died, I took over the family business and rebranded using my middle name. He met her eyes directly. I was Julian Damien Blackwood, and I was engaged to Victoria Winters 5 years ago. Understanding dawned across Fiona's face. You're Night Horizon, she whispered. You bought my paintings. I didn't know you were Victoria's sister until after our first meeting, he admitted. By then, I'd already fallen in. He stopped himself. I'd already committed to the gallery. The final exhibition. The revelation hung between them like a brush suspended over canvas, poised to either create or destroy. Was this all some elaborate revenge against Victoria? Fiona asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Funding her sister's dream only to pull it away? No, Damien answered immediately. It was coincidence, then curiosity, then. He gestured to the gallery around them. Then it was this. Something real. Around them, the last guest departed, leaving them alone amid the artwork that had brought them together, through an unlikely series of connections. Your painting saved me after Victoria left, Damien continued. I never expected to meet the artist, much less discover she was connected to my past. Fiona moved to stand before Urban Twilight, the painting that had started everything. I created this the week Victoria told our parents I was wasting my potential. The city lights were how I felt, surrounded by life but completely isolated. It was the first thing that made me feel less alone after she ended things, Damien admitted, joining her. They stood side by side, studying the artwork that had unknowingly connected them years before they met. The silence between them softened, became contemplative rather than tense. I should have told you sooner, Damien said finally. Would you have ever told me? If I hadn't mentioned Victoria tonight? He considered this honestly. I don't know. I was afraid of losing this. He gestured between them. Whatever it's becoming. Fiona turned to face him fully. I need to know something. Is your investment in Threshold genuine? Or was some part of you using me to settle a score with my sister? The gallery investment stands on its own merits, Damien replied without hesitation. Your vision, your talent, they deserve this platform. Whatever happened between Victoria and me has nothing to do with that. The truth of his words resonated in the quiet gallery. Fiona studied him, searching for deception and finding none. Then where do we go from here? She asked. That depends, Damien said, taking a careful step toward her. Can you separate me from your history with Victoria? See me as more than your sister's ex? A small smile touched Fiona's lips. I've been doing that for weeks, haven't I? I just didn't know it. The opening exhibition of Threshold Gallery debuted to critical acclaim 3 weeks later. Art lovers and critics alike praised the curation, the space, the vision that brought emerging artists together under one roof. At the center of it all stood Fiona Winters, her own collection, including the now famous Urban Twilight, drawing particular attention. Victoria Winters attended the grand opening, her first substantial conversation with her sister in years. The reconciliation was tentative, fragile, but genuine, built on Fiona's success rather than despite it. Your investor seems quite taken with you, Victoria observed, watching Damien across the room. Should I be concerned about the coincidence? Fiona smiled. Not a coincidence. A connection. Art has a way of bringing together what belongs together. Later, as the evening wound down, Damien and Fiona stood before a new painting, one she'd created specifically for the opening. It depicted two paths converging rather than diverging, meeting at a sun-drenched clearing. What's this one called? Damien asked, though he could see the small placard beside it. Full Circle, Fiona answered, slipping her hand into his. Some stories don't end where they begin. They just find their way to where they were always meant to go. Outside the gallery windows, Seattle's lights mirrored the cityscape in urban twilight, no longer symbols of isolation, but constellations connecting different lives through pinpoints of brightness against the dark.